Hey guys, I'm going to be doing a scouting guide. So I really think that the game is pretty much almost solved by going into Krugs. Early game is super important. So I really do want to give some tips about early game, and then going into mid game and late game, why you should scout, a mechanic that I'm sure a lot of people already know about. But I'm also going to, it kind of goes hand in hand with the positioning guide. I can bring that up real quick. I made it on YouTube, and I kind of just cover, I think in this video, I just walk through every single champion and how to position it, but I'm going to be doing a little bit more advanced positioning for late game threats and stuff like that, so that'll be towards the end of the video. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead. To note is you cannot fight the last four. You can sweat. You can sweat it and kind of just and record on like a notepad, or you can even probably use like some third-party program or something. But really, to play at the highest level, I don't do it, and I'm always top in the ladder. You can generally just have a feel for it. When you're scouting, like I think my hotkey is tab. When you spam tab and you see someone that you haven't fought in a while, maybe you look to position for them. And usually it's pretty accurate, +or -1. So like if you scout and you see that you haven't fought maybe 2 people in a while, then maybe position for those 2. And then just doing that is definitely going to help your game a lot. But anyway, you cannot fight the last 4, and that'll become more, like I'll show you why it matters later. But anyway, early game scouting, the reason you want to look at everyone's board is usually you want to preserve win streak or preserve lose streak, and I'll offer an example. And then also, even if you're lose streaking, you can save HP. For example, if you have Diana with Pike and you have Sin, you can have Diana jump onto like a lonely Nidalee or something. So even if your frontline is trash and you're going to lose the round anyway, you can save 2 HP by just having your Diana kill one of the backline units. So while you're lose streaking, you can save HP, and while you're win streaking, you can maintain your win streak. Mid game scouting is, after Krugs, people usually have a direction with where they want to play their comp. Let's say you are looking for Talon, or you have the option to go Talon items with IE, or let's say Ashe items with GS. But you scout the lobby and you see 3 people have Bramble, or 2 people are looking for Dusk, and 1 person already has Bramble. Chances are you probably want to play Ashe over Talon, because Talon has a really hard time dealing with Riven. Especially if your units are pretty flexible, which they should be, because Adept is going to be probably your strongest frontline regardless. But not only that, it's also like, let's say you're scouting and 5 people have GS. And then you have the opportunity to maybe make like Shojin and then play like sharpshooters or something. You can pivot if you are 50-50. My general advice for pivoting is, if you have the opener for something, like let's say you have an Ashe and you have a GS already, and there's 5 other people that are trying to contest Ashe, who cares? You're playing Ashe, you have the opener for it, you're in a much better spot than they are. And yeah, and then late game scouting, it's basically just almost always positioning, in addition to that you cannot fight last 4. But obviously, I think early game win streak, lose streak is super important, because making the first in-roll 10 is going to make you the first in-roll 20, and a lot of the gold is going to compound later into the game. So like maybe like 5 gold early game is worth maybe 20-30 gold by the time you end the game. But anyway, I'll be going through some more positioning through LHS Builder. But anyway, I'm going to give an example of early game scouting. Okay, so this is the example. As you can see, I think I'm 4 lose into neutrals, and when you lose going into neutrals, you're on a 5 loss, so you get 3 extra gold. But not only do you get the 3 gold going into neutrals, that 1 round of neutrals you still make 3 gold, and that is usually the difference in interval between 20, 30, 40. So you can make every single interval, so it's like an extra like 7 gold or something, and 7 gold obviously compounds. Obviously I'm rambling, but let me just go ahead. So I realized I fought Gialu, Jing, FJ, and Kilvix. So I can only fight Brunkastar, Charizard, and Miss Voidsense. So now I'm going to go ahead and scout them, and I see that their boards are lit, and I'm saying like, oh, I can't beat anyone, so I can just play my strongest board. But let's say I saw someone else that was trying to lose streak with me. A lot of times I will keep an eye on their board, and if they try to sell units and try to lose streak, I will sell and match them, because you always want to go into this 5 lose streak. But this also goes into, it also works hand in hand with win streak. So like a lot of times you can position like Garen to spin maximum. Like for example, if they're frontline their Elise or something, you can have Garen spin on them if you put it right in front of Elise. But obviously if you don't put Garen in front of Elise, it's not going to spin on them, and that could change the fight. All these little things do matter, especially early game. But like, let's see this lose, right? I'm going to lose this round, and I'm making 30, and because of the 5 lose streak, look, now I'm making 40. And then after this round, even if I don't get gold, I got gold. But now I'm making 50 guaranteed. So if I didn't get gold, I probably wouldn't be able to make 50. Or I wouldn't have made 40, and then I would have made 50. So that's a lot of gold. And then now I'm just going to be healthy on eco. And my health is not too bad. I have a carousel priority. I think I covered the mid game as well. And then late game scouting, I'll get into it. But let me just go into early game scouting. This is, I do cover almost all the units. But again, Diana is just going to try to kill units. Let's say they have a Nidalee in the back line. You can have Diana just jump straight on the Nidalee. Elise, generally, melee is paired with keepers plus Pike, and then you can have Pike opposite side, and you can decorner them, and then Pike stuns maximum units. I'm not going to cover like all of them. I'm just going to cover the key ones. Nidalee is always corner because it's maximum DPS. Yasuo I saw. Okay, okay, so now Garen. Garen is one of those units solo frontline. I think I talked about it in my previous video, Hecarim. But now I'm going to probably give some more examples. Is Janna. Like, let's say early game you're fighting, you want to win streak and you see someone has a chosen Janna. If Diana jumps on Janna, I promise you, I mean, okay, honestly, if they have chosen Diana, chosen Janna, you're most likely not going to win anyway. But you are 100% not going to win if your Diana jumps on the Janna and just starts feeding her mana. Like even a Kali can't even kill a chosen Janna. The Janna will just non-stop sustain damage and then shield her team as well. And you're going to take a 5-unit loss instead of, say, a 3-unit loss. So that's like one example of a chosen that you shouldn't deal with. Hecarim, try to not have all your units surround him. So like, let's say they have a Hecarim in the middle. Maybe you can do like Lissandra here and then have a melee here. And then maybe your melee can walk backline. But that it really depends on their board. Jarvan, unit's not that good. Jack solo frontline. But anyway, let me just go into late game. Obviously, like you want to be opposite side of Zed going into late game. Jinx full corner. Aurelia is one of those units that you can position to actually disable their backline. But if they have QSS, it's not really worth it. Aatrox pulls corner. So one advanced tip with Aatrox is, let's say you have a carry in the backline. Let's just say this is your carry Vayne. You can do Vayne or Aatrox opposite corner because sometimes Sins jump on Vayne. Or jump on right side, and then Aatrox can actually pull the Sins away. So that's one way to do Aatrox. Yeah, I think the forecasts are a lot more interesting. Ahri is the same thing. You usually position with Yuumi. I think I talked in my previous video, but let me just emphasize it again because it is a forecast. Yuumi, if he heals here, it always goes to farthest is how Yuumi works. It heals the lowest HP, and then it goes to the farthest. So if you put like a lot of like tanks here, and then you give GA to Ahri, the Yuumi will always give Ahri attack speed, which is a faster cast, which is really good. Ashe is cornered, like always. Just be wary of Aatrox. Cassiopeia is actually a frontline unit. You always almost look to one of the corners because it can actually hit the entire. It does like a cone here and it hits like the entire like this area, which is really nice. Jhin is just standard corner. Morgana, actually, if you have Locket or GA, you can actually frontline for a faster cast. The first cast is really the only proc that matters because once you get the Morello on, it does a lot of DPS and also Dazzler. Riven is just almost always a solo frontline. You can surround it a little bit. Sejuani is solo frontline, but just be wary of Sejuani. So for example, let's say someone has Sejuani frontline. So imagine they have a Sejuani here. This is just going to be one of those late game positionings where, let's say you have your entire backline here and they have Sejuani frontline here. A lot of times you can actually put your frontline here and the Sejuani will always walk to the left. That's why on a lot of people's streams, you almost always see like their backline and their frontline a little bit like disproportionate. For example, like if you put your Sejuani here and they put this Sejuani here, what's going to happen is your Sejuani is going to ult this way, but his Sejuani is always going to ult this way, stunning these hexes, but your backline is just free hitting. So that's one way you can get away with Ashe without a QSS. Yeah, but that's basically Sejuani. Shen is also good. It's almost always your solo frontline, especially when you're running Adept, but you can actually put it backline and taunt the Sins, which is not always bad. Talon, you actually probably don't want to jump in the clump, rarely ever the middle, because what happens when it jumps in the middle is after their frontline or backline is killing your frontline, it'll almost always retarget Talon. Just because if you're in the middle, it attracts left side aggro and right side aggro, but if it's hugging left, it only gets left side aggro. But that's why frontline is super important, especially for like even Sins. Warwick almost needs Locket. It's pretty much just always frontline with Locket and Zeke's. Azir. So Azir is something that I really want to stress, especially because Talon is a meta. Let's say you are protecting. Okay, I'll just do an obvious example: Kindred and Ashe. Okay, and like pretend these Tahm Kenches are your soldiers. The problem with this positioning most of the time is that your Ashe is going to get stuck when they are positioning top left. But what you can do to fix that is you always hug your front line on these 3 hexes. So if you do like let's say your front line is like Jax Aurelia, whatever, it doesn't really matter. It's just arbitrary. But now what's always going to happen is at least your Ashe is going to hit something. And that way your Ashe will not get stuck. And the reason this positioning is good is because the soldiers can't move, obviously, and these guys will never get decornered, aka Talon, Katarina, Akali, Pike can never jump on your carries. And not only that, let's say you have like a Lux on this side, which is probably pretty common. Let's say Talon is jumping on your Lux, and after Talon kills your Lux, it tries to jump to the highest DPS unit, right? And like the highest DPS unit on your comp is most likely going to be Ashe. But the thing is with Talon here is Talon cannot jump on your Ashe, and it'll it'll only be able to target not Tom Kench, one of the soldiers or Azir, and it probably targets one of the soldiers. It'll probably target one of those, and then after this, it still can't reset on your Ashe if it targeted this one, and then your Ashe is basically free to hit. But if you have GA, it does help, but that's why Azir I feel like is so good, is because if you are lacking frontline, you can have Azir soldiers be frontline, and then that way your Talon can reset as well, or even just buy time for your Ashe to pop off. But if there's a lot of sins and you don't have ZZ Rod, that's one way you can do it as well. But yeah, it's just super flexible, and not only that, it offers basically a global Sejuani ult. It's really good. But Ezreal, keep in mind for Lux though, it ults opposite corner for this unit. So if they have like Ashe cornered on the right side, you probably want left side. But that's where the importance of the last four. So like let's say 2 people are hugging left, 1% is hugging right, or you have a feel for that. And you haven't fought them in a while. Usually, like a lot of times though, you're scouting for the strongest person, especially when you're like probably one of the stronger people in the lobby, and you're scouting and you see, oh, this guy's stronger than me. Hey, you can maybe even position for just the strongest. And like let's say the strongest person is hugging left, you can even do like left, and then the last second you just swap right, and then they can't like counter scout you. Yone is almost always just solo frontline, just getting the initial CC insane. I really like hugging one of the corners though. Even middle is okay though. I'm just worried that sometimes he takes too much damage. Yeah, and then set's kind of the same thing like Sejuani. Let's say their backline is over here. You kind of want your set hugging a little bit to the left. So it'll grab this unit and go to the right instead of hugging middle, and it's a 50-50 between if it goes left or right, depending on how their frontline positions. Pretty straightforward. I'm not just gonna be like an idiot just being like, oh, you need to scout every turn. Like, yeah, like scouting as much as possible is great, but scouting efficiently is probably like, you can easily stream the game, you can easily interact with your chat and all that stuff while maintaining like a high level of play, because scouting really is not that difficult. It's just early game. If you're lose streaking, try to save HP. If you're win streaking, you try to preserve your win streak. If you're lose streaking, you also try to preserve your lose streak. Mid game, it's the same thing. You just include this, but you also should be looking at items like whether or not like what people are playing, how should you itemize Z0 against Talon, etc., etc. And then late game is just the positioning I was talking about, while in addition to scouting like this. So hopefully this video helped. I do encourage you guys to watch the positioning guide where I talk about every unit, but obviously some units are more meta than others, and I tried to cover some of the examples there. Peace.